stayed this morning with a group of teachers from one of the secondary schools, and I saw two of the persons here out of that group. They are faced with a number of challenges, especially with the double shift, even though it's from 12 to 6. But for them, the day starts from 6 in the morning. They have family and family members to prepare, and it's a lot of challenges. We also have a number of teachers at elementary school now that are in afternoon schools programs, and sometimes you have to wait till the parents reach after 6. Well, in any case, whatever the whole issue is at this point in time, I would like to welcome all who took time out of their busy schedules to be here, and I would like to especially welcome two persons from the French side, Danielle, Danny, I call her affectionately, because actually I'm her aunt, and she's in education, Danny, and Linda, the two ladies sitting there, is also from the French side. We are very privileged to have them tonight also, since this topic is something for the whole of St. Martin. Mr. Nils Kastberg has been with us over a number of days. We have had fruitful meetings. We have had meetings with the workers' organization. We have also had meetings with the faith-based organizations on Saturday. And today is actually the opportunity for the teachers. The teachers would be one of the main factors for this whole research program. And as one of the coordinators of the anti-poverty platform, I'm also proud to say that there is a collaboration with the USM, the University of St. Martin, on this project. And therefore, we have none other than the president of the USM tonight to address you. So I can talk a lot, but it's time for me to sit back and invite to say the words of welcome, invite the president of the university, and then I would invite one of the coordinators of the platform, and I would invite the SG of the Department of Education, of Public Education, which is here, Shamina Powell-Richardson. And after Mrs. Shamina Powell-Richardson, and after that, we would have the man of the hour to take us straight into the lecture.
I'm really excited about this evening for a couple of reasons. One, because we're meeting with union activists in education. And I have that as my background. I was a union activist for university professors in Puerto Rico and held leadership positions in the National Union, Association of University Professors, and we always work closely with the unions of public schools, of elementary and high schools. And so this is bring me back home to where I've started in my professional career. Secondly, because USM produces a significant portion of educators on the island, especially here on the southern part of the island. So I think that this encounter, this dialogue is very important. I would just like to remind everyone that the original mission of the University of St. Martin was to service the entire island, not just the southern part of the island. And so that we open our doors for critical thinking, for community dialogue. It's always a pleasure to have our brothers and sisters from the north side join us here. So just like to welcome you and to let you feel comfortable in this dialogue after the lecture that we have from Mr. Nils Kastberg. As Mrs. Elshot was saying, we've been since Friday with Mr. Kastberg exploring the possibilities of conducting research, not in the traditional sense of academic research, but research that is targeted directly to or towards the needs of the general population. And in this case, we're talking about the needs especially of children and youth. We spoke with other union leaders, we spoke with communities of faith, and I think that this evening is called for, because if we're going to look at the condition, the socio-economic condition of children and youth on the island, who better to conspire with than with those teachers who from day to day see and interact with our youth and children. So I won't keep you any longer. Thank you, Secretary General, for joining us. I also need to mention that we've already received a warm welcome and support in exploring these possibilities from the Ministry of Education, Youth, Culture and Sport. And we really look forward to collaborating and to realizing this research in order to serve the country, St. Martin.
The project that we foresaw started in this way. Let me explain a little bit of the background. 1 year after Irma, the people that we represent were still of the opinion that help was needed. Now, how to prepare that, how to let them know. So we got the cooperation of the one that will record tonight also. That was Mr. Ricardo William and Orion Production. We went into the neighborhoods, and there we interviewed workers, families, head of households, and there we got from them firsthand, since hurricane, what happened and what is still needed. All those households have children. So they spoke about children, but we did not speak with the children. And the beginning of this year we said, we also have to give the children opportunity to speak out their wishes. Because government came up with a very ambitious plan, the roadmap for the coming 7 years. It is called the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. But when you look in the plan, it's online, then you see actually nothing particular targeting the children of St. Martin. Yes, we saw that they want to target the buildings and the airport and, infrastructure. But the human infrastructure, the things that actually have made St. Martin, the people, that was, according to that thinking with the World Bank, just put the airport there for the tourists to come, and then automatically that maybe will help the people. But when you speak with the people, they have other wishes. Some of them having jobs, some of them not having jobs. But what about the children? What do they say? And so what we did was organize a session here together with the university for those children of which the parents were in the interviews, in the documentary. And there is where we got help from Mr. Nils Kastberg. He's the former director of UNICEF Latin America and the Caribbean. And in that capacity, he was here a few years ago already. So we know him from since then. And then we asked him, how can we tap into that knowledge that is there for us to do this, bringing these children in the picture, empowering them, let them speak out. And so within 24 hours, we had already a draft that we could use for our pilot project with these children. That is recorded. It's on YouTube. And so you can see that part where you see how these children started to think and reflect on what happened after the hurricane and how they would like to become resilient, how they would like to see the future. And what we saw and actually got out of that is that, hey, there should be done more thoroughly. Not just talking with them. And it was like they were overrumpled. They were just at that moment, they had to think back. And some of them, actually, you could see, were a little hesitating because they didn't want to go back in that memory. So we said we have to do something in a more professional way. Let us tap into that. And so that is how we asked Mr. Kastberg, can you provide us with some support that we can give content to a project? We think it will be a 1-year project where you will have to do this research. To know what children think is a process, because certain things they don't know, but you have to inform them, and then you have to know what is that. One of the things that we want them to know is this. They have rights. Children rights. Child rights. And for you to ask them, okay, where are you now? What are you missing? Where you want to go? How you want to see St. Martin tomorrow? How you want to see your future, you yourself, right? You have to feed them with more information. This is not only your situation, but it's a situation in the island too. And then reflect with them, what would you like to see? So that's a process. Who better to involve than those that are already with a lot of children in the classroom? So that's how we said we want to see you two, and we want to hear from you too. How is the best way to get that information from the youth, from St. Martin? Why we wanted to see the unions? Because they have children and they have grandchildren. And they also have an idea of what they would like for the children. It's not only the job that they want and the money that they want. You want also to see the children grow up. So we said, your support is also needed in this project. And then the faith-based organizations, where we saw, according to the statistics, that 80% of the households here in St. Martin, they are from Christian faith-based organizations. So we said, let's talk with them too, because one way or the other we have to reach those children, those household families. And so by saying, how can we get these children on board, for them to tell their story, UNICEF had certain tools to do the research and also to involve them and help them to shape their own future. Now, with that said, we said, well, no one else better than to highlight for us how we can go about that than Mr. Nils Kastberg. So actually, I introduced him already for his introduction, with that said. And as Anti-Poverty Platform, all we can tell you is this. These few days that we embarked on this mission, first with the university to get an MOU, and then also to get a board and staff to understand what we want to do. That was wonderful. The warm support, welcome that we got. Then with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Culture and Sport. The minister even came Friday evening to address the worker unions that was here. So that kind of positive vibration is something that we would like you to know, that, hey, this is something so serious for the future of St. Martin. We all on board. That's what we got from it. The same thing happened on Saturday with the representatives from faith-based organizations. After the lecture, they stayed back for a workshop. And I can tell you, it was inspiring how they all were suggesting what to do and what shall we do within the faith-based communities to support this project too. And then it's about time for you all as teachers to become involved. Informed first and foremost, and then we will have a little session where we will give you the opportunity for shoot your questions or your suggestions, but it will not be only tonight. We will be embarking in more sessions with you so that this project can be developed in a very best manner. And we have to thank you from the other side. Because usually when we organize things, and because of our St. Martin Anti-Poverty Platform being very much concentrated with the NGOs from this side, a lot of attention is only on this side. But when we came to the university, Mr. Carmona said, but I am not only looking at the children on this side, I would like to see the ones on the other side too. And we said, of course, why not? So we are happy that you also want to join already in this stage to think along with us, and so that we can be more effective in thinking about the situation of our youth and involving them with that information where they want to go. And of course, we as responsible people have to guide them. And so we are this evening privileged from the southern side with the Secretary General from the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. She's very youthful, so she will address us tonight from the perspective of the ministry, right? What they are already doing, how they want to see this, and what they want to see from all of us too. So let me introduce with that the Acting Secretary General from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport and Culture, eh? That's also part of it. Ms. Shamina Powell.
I think, which I deem as a very important project, which I think the St. Martin community at large will benefit from. So, Mr. Jezeroen, Mrs. Elshort, and Dr. Carmona, much strength and courage, and you definitely have our support from the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. And I'm even double delighted that you chose Mr. Nils Kastberg to come to our shores. I recall right after the hurricane, when there was a possibility to WhatsApp, we had a conversation, and he said, you know, if you need me, I'll come. And so we didn't get an opportunity to bring him, but I think St. Martin did. Not just the ministry, but St. Martin. So we are thankful that he's here, and from what we have received and before and even these last couple of days, it has been tremendously enlightening and certainly a great blessing. So thank you again once more for having me. The topic that I was given to speak on is the importance of teacher involvement in the realization of the rights of the child. So what I will do quickly, and I've been given 5 minutes, I'll try to stick within that period, is to talk about what should be your involvement as a teacher. But I do believe that it is quite important for you to understand first what you should be involved in. And it's as it relates to children's rights. What do you understand? What do you know? And so I'm going to give you a little synopsis of the Children's Rights Convention and see, maybe I might quiz you a bit to see if you have an idea about some of the articles. You never know if that opportunity arises. Children have rights which are written down in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and we call it CRC. The convention is a treaty which is a legal agreement between countries. On November 20th, 1989, the CRC was adopted in New York by the United Nations. However, only on January 16, 1998, which was 9 years after, the Netherlands and the Netherlands Antilles adopted the convention. As a matter of fact, 195 states are party to the CRC. And if I ask you which major country is not, you might be in shock. And that is the United States. But their rights are embedded in the human rights for children as well. So they didn't deem it as necessary to sign on to the CRC. It means that almost all the states in the world are party to this convention. And this also makes it the most widely ratified human rights instrument. This points out that the government of all these countries believe in the importance of the rights of children. The convention has a preamble, and the preamble recalls basic human rights, principles established through the UN and other organizations. Part 1 of the CRC composes of the articles 1 to 41, and it contains a catalog of rights and several provisions for state parties. In this part, you can find the actual children's rights, so from 1 to 41. Then part 2 are articles 42 to 45, and it deals with the states parties' reporting obligations, as well as the CRC's monitoring body, which is the Committee of the Rights of the Child. And then part 3 are articles 46 to 54. And these articles regulate the technical questions of the ratification process, the enforcement, the reservations, amendments, and other similar matters of the CRC. And of course, the children's rights is laid out, I said, in articles 1 to 41, and it can also be divided in 4 groups, and I think this is quite important for you to know. First, there are the rights regarding the things necessary for children, such as the right to healthy food, the right to go to school, the right to health care, and the right to play. Then secondly, there are rights for children in difficult circumstances who need special attention, such as children who are without parents, so foster children, children with disabilities, refugee children, and children in conflict with the law. And then third, there are the participation rights, such as the right to information, freedom of religion and freedom of association, and the right of every child to express their own opinion, and the right also to be heard. As a matter of fact, the convention has adopted and allow now for young people, children, to actually come to the regular meetings, and so they can actually voice their opinion there. And I had that privilege of being there, I believe it was in 2013, and there was some young people there from the Netherlands and other countries voicing their opinion. And they were youth, or minors rather. Then fourth, which is the last group, the protection rights, and this is an area that we have focused on by the ministry, where we have embarked on establishing a guide to the National Protocol of Child Abuse, something that has, I would say, been at the forefront over the last couple of years. And so we have developed a national protocol, a guide towards a national protocol, which outlines specifically the entities that deal with child abuse and some of the processes that you should engage in reporting as such. So the protection against abuse, including sexual abuse, the right to be protected against drugs, war, violence, and child labor. Following this brief overview of the convention, I wish to now briefly elucidate on the topic, which is the importance of teacher involvement in the realization of the rights of the child. As teachers, and actually I'm also a teacher by profession, not at this moment practicing, but sometimes I believe we practice while we're at the ministry, right? I see my colleagues here. We practice because sometimes we're in the field as well, besides just being occupied with policy development and programs. As teachers, educators, you have a direct and a very meaningful influence on children's lives. I know sometimes you say, wow, am I this child's mother or father? Because sometimes that's what is expected of us. But you do have a very meaningful influence on their lives, including the ways in which children perceive and understanding their own right. I probably will dare say that we spend, and you as educators spend most of the hours that children are awake with them versus their parents, right? If my math is correct, teachers are more hours with the children than their actual parents. So that makes you very valuable in terms of their upbringing and also influencing in particular this aspect of children's rights. Considering this, I would deem it as a responsibility to understand and also be familiar with the scope of children's rights, to facilitate the practical realization of these rights, and also to proactively participate in promoting fairness, because that's why we have children's rights, and in addressing those aspects of school life that are inconsistent with respect to children's rights. Now, what a responsibility. But that's how it is, and I would want us to really engage in understanding the rights of a child. And you can Google. If you Google, you can find, for example, I've printed this one. This is a child-friendly language of the rights. So in very simple terms, they have outlined the specific articles, and you can communicate that with the children. But besides that, we also have the booklet that deals directly with all the articles. And so you can also Google this. And then there's also another booklet, and this is more children-friendly. It says Kinderrechtenverdrag voor kinderen en jongeren. So this is specifically written for children so they can understand it, for children and young people. And this one is more for adults. So I would encourage you to make use and Google, and you will find lots of material on the UNICEF website. I want to continue by saying that as educators, there is an important difference between teaching children about rights as something they will hold as adults versus something that they should hold as children. So the manner in which you go about teaching them is extremely important. You would have to get to their level so they would understand. And you would have to use actual, I would say, experiences, daily experiences that will allow the child to be able to identify with that specific right. For example, the right to education. You can be very clear in terms of explaining them also that the government of St. Martin has compulsory education. And so the fact that they have determined that there should be compulsory education means to say that they are signing on and realizing that children have a right to education. It is also important that that your educational process involves both teaching about the right, and I said also creating opportunities for children to also enact their rights in the classroom, in the school, and in the community. Some of you have heard Mrs. Elshot indicated that some are busy with afternoon programs. So it is possible also that in those programs that you can also teach the children their rights. In this way, children's rights, and I would call it education, is also part of the curriculum, but also it allows the children to really live out their rights. We would admonish you to adopt a children's rights approach to your educational process. So by challenging them at all times to understand and to get involved so that they eventually will be, I would say, healthy citizens within society. Children's rights education, if I may call it, can be taught across all grades. So from kindergarten right up to secondary school. And spaces already exist, I understood, in the curriculum for teaching and also for allowing opportunities for the children to learn. I want to, at this moment, as Mr. Jezerum said, outline to you what the government of St. Martin also is doing as it relates to children's rights. The government has been embarking on several awareness campaigns. We started in 2014 and beyond that to sensitize the public on subjects such as child abuse. We've been throughout the various communities, also community centers, where we gave lectures, and also enlightened where you can find the actual article within the Civil Code that deals with child abuse. There will be coming up bi-monthly interviews on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, also as it relates to the legislation on child protection, also the role of the various child protection institutions, such as the Court of Guardian. As a matter of fact, the Court of Guardian, by legislation, is the central reporting institution for child abuse. So you can go directly to them to report as such. Some persons go to the police station where they encounter the youth police, but the Court of Guardian is the official institution charged with handling child abuse. Then we will be embarking on capacity building activities for youth leaders. As a matter of fact, we started today with a training on dealing with children with trauma in collaboration with the Court of Guardian and Willem Schrikker Group from the Netherlands. We will have trainings on the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And we will have also coming up, St. Martin is part of the Kingdom Task Force for Children's Rights. Each country has a representative, and we have been meeting since 2013 on the matter of children's rights. And there will be a 3-day conference for partners within the kingdom, and this will be related to fostering stronger relations and promoting children's rights within the kingdom. And of course, some of you may know that we have annually the Children's Rights Program. It commences prior even to International Day of the Rights of the Child, which is November 20th. That's commemorated internationally. And we collaborate with the northern part of the island as well as Anguilla as it relates to the sport activities. And there are many different programs that are carried out under this umbrella. So I would encourage you to perhaps, if you have the time and you see the need, to come to the Department of Youth within the ministry, where they can give you some more info. I also want to let you know that at this moment, St. Martin is collaborating with UNICEF Netherlands, where there is a process of having a new situation analysis on the situation of children and adolescents in St. Martin. We have a report that exists, and you can find it. You can read that report at the website www.unicef.nl/children's rights. And there have been 6 reports, one related to St. Martin, and of course the other islands, I would say within the Dutch Caribbean, as well as there has been a specific report where youngsters from all the islands were interviewed, and you can read their response towards their situation. I must say that it was a very small sample, so we didn't consider it very representative as such. But we are hoping that with this new process, that we can really delve into knowing the situation of children on the island and youngsters. I also want to add before I leave here that as a ministry, I want to assure you that within the process of the recovery and the establishment of the resilience report for the country St. Martin, we have also looked at the software. Our ministry is geared towards working with the software. That's the children in all sense of the word. And so the World Bank process engages what they call different trajectories. And the first trajectory has dealt actually with the hardware, and that is public buildings as it relates to the schools and the repairs of public buildings. The second trajectory, we have put forward a draft master plan, which not only focuses on the hardware, but also the software, and in particular, the protection and the psychosocial, recovery of our children. So that will come, we will see that coming forth in the second trajectory for the World Bank as such. And of course, that has to be approved by the Council of Ministers and the interim committee. So I hope that I have been able to enlighten you somewhat. And these documents that I have here, I would like to present it to the platform and encourage all to Google as such the information. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Children. This is the one for you related to adults. This is for you as well.
Thank you. Thank you for this very symbolic gesture. We will make sure that we can disseminate this, multiply it. So without further delay, by the way, I would like to recognize also the Dean of the University, Dr. Rolinda Carter, right? And then my brother, the educator, he has been educating us these days. I would love for you also tonight to experience his richness, his didactical principles of how he can get something across, and the blessings that he provides. Thank you.
Thank you. Very privileged to be with you all, and also privileged to see participants coming from the French side. And in fact, I wanted to start reading some of the recommendations of the Committee on the Rights of the Child to France from 2016. And it's actually quite amazing how we need to use some of the material that is available there. Let me just make sure. I need to change glasses. I realize if I want to read such small print. It is a very long report and very, very strong and forcefully written, I must say, in unusual, non-diplomatic language. And I think it would be very valuable for teachers to read it. And it starts off, I wanted to go back to the very start, where it says, and I apologize that it takes a little, but I prefer to read it straight from there. But it raises the whole question of the inequality between France and the territories. And I think it would be very important, particularly for teachers who want to advocate, for better quality of education and so on, to review it. Today we were looking at the recommendations to the Netherlands, and it was the same, and it's been saying the same since 2003. And it is raising the issue of the inequalities within the kingdom in the case of the report of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, as well as the universal periodic reporting to the Netherlands. Now, the report of the Committee on the Rights of the Child from 2016 to France contains similar, very, very harsh recommend. The committee recommends that the state party establish a budgeting process which adequately takes into account the needs of children, with clear allocations for children in the relevant sectors and agencies, specific indicators, and a tracking system. And then B, increase the budget allocated to the social sectors and to children in disadvantaged situations, such as the Roma children, migrant children, including asylum-seeking and refugee children, and children in Mayotte and other overseas departments and territories. And it continues, and it goes on and on and on. And you can read in paragraph 64, or rather, let's go to the 69, also on the recommendations of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, which is headed Standard of Living. And while welcoming the recent efforts by the state party, in this case France, to address disparities in the overseas departments and territories, the committee nevertheless notes with particular concern the persistence and widening of social inequality across the territory of the state party, the slow progress in reducing the gap in the enjoyment of rights by children in the overseas departments and territories, particularly in French Guiana and Mayotte, and the situation of migrant children, particularly unaccompanied migrant children. It is also, and then it continues with a series of recommendations. I wanted to start by reading this, and those in the southern part of the island shouldn't be too happy because what it tells the Netherlands is not very different. And I think it's high time that you start using, what the international human rights machinery has established. And very often it is the ministries for foreign affairs that send out a little note, can you tell me what you're doing in terms of this or this? And then every ministry writes something, and then they go to Geneva, and 3-4 people are there. From St. Martin, there were 3. I don't know if from the French side there was any representative at the 2016 session on the rights of the child. How can you defend the children of Sualiga, both north and south, if you are not represented there? And if you, in a meaningful way, don't go through this. So that's why today we were going through with the university how they can use existing human rights instruments and reports so that you can start not by reading what is in the newspapers, not by reading by activists or whatever. You can actually start with what the human rights bodies have told France and has told the Netherlands. And as teachers, you have a lot of material, and I just read you very briefly 2 things. When you start going through there, you have a lot of material. The issue of inequality, for starters, needs to be highlighted. In fact, if you were to give this to a journalist and say, publish this, and they put it in their own headlines and so on, it would look quite different. No? And I think it would have a big impact. Still, the way it is written, it's a non-diplomatic language. Normally, you would find much more diplomatic and careful language, but here you can actually read in very direct language of what is happening in terms of inequality. Now, why are you gathered here? Well, you're gathered, I would think, for 2-3 purposes. Firstly, obviously the anti-poverty platform as an alliance wants to broaden the alliance of all those concerned in all walks of life around we need to do things better for our children. You know, there comes a point in our lives when we think, well, I'll try to reduce my expenditures and make sure that as much as possible, I do as much as possible for my children and my grandchildren and whatever. You know, you want to focus on what their situation will be. And I think that it is therefore important to bring together all those that want to improve the situation of the children of St. Martin, the whole island, you know, that you find places where you can meet. And as it stands now, we have the teachers, we have the unions, we have the university, we have people of faith, and there might be others that gradually join in this. And it shouldn't be necessarily, you know, a coalition against the government, but rather it should build on the best that everybody can build. Now, why do I say this? Well, firstly, because the challenges that children face, you can find in 4 environments. Firstly, in the home. And I will go through a little bit of those challenges, but those you know very well, because as teachers, when they come in the morning, you know how the thing was at home in the morning. If it was good, you can see it on the face. If it wasn't good, you are paying for the consequences as a teacher of what happened in the home. So the home is number 1. The second is the school. The third are institutions where they might go and participate. Why does the UN use the word institutions? Well, it's the places to which you send your child or you go to with your child where they are supposed to be safe. It can be a church, it can be a social club, it can be a gym, different types of settings where you trust everybody that is there. There are places you don't send your children to. But there are places to which you go with your children where they are supposed to be protected. So that's the third environment. And the fourth is the street and the community and the society at large. So obviously, the government cannot resolve all of those issues. That's why we need to look at this broader alliance where everybody tries to gain greater knowledge about, okay, what is my part and what is my part of the bigger picture. So I think that's one very important reason why you are here. One, obviously, if you want to be part of this alliance, you are so welcome, and we need this type of initiatives. And secondly, your part in the education sector is fundamental, because that's, regretfully, the 2 places where children learn violence initially, and where they meet most violence are the home and the school. You know, it's not the street. It's in the home that children mostly learn violence. Instead of peaceful resolution of differences, what they see are shouting, beatings, etc., etc., etc. And regretfully, the Caribbean belongs to the part of the world where violence within the family still continues at an extremely high level. And the reason why we're also engaging so much faith leaders is because sometimes their lingers on a misunderstanding around the interpretation, for instance, of the use of the rod. There is this expression, spare the rod, spoils the child. I can see on your lips that you know that one. And that's actually not a quote from Proverbs, but it's kind of pieced together from Proverbs. There are 5 references in Proverbs, depending on what translation, 5 or 6, depending what translation you use. But basically, the Bible, you always need to let the Bible interpret. How is the rod used elsewhere in the Bible? And when you look elsewhere in the Bible, you have somebody like David who says, thy rod and thy staff, you all know the Bible here. So, how did he use the rod? He used it to guide the sheep on the hills of Judea, you know. And I don't know, I'm quite familiar with sheep. And at one of the foundations that I help run, we have like 50, 60 sheep. And you know, if they go off track, it's enough that one goes off track and everybody else starts doing the same. So having a rod to guide them and keep them on the pathway from no grass here to grass on the other side, you know, you need a rod to guide them. And you need the staff in case one falls off. You try to keep the others while you bring up the one that fell off. Now, even Moses had, you know, a staff, a rod. And on one occasion, what did he do? Instead of talking to the rock, what did he do? He hit twice, it says. He used violence instead of dialogue. He was supposed to speak for there to be a response. Instead, he used violence. Now, notice that there was a punishment for using that violence. What happened to Moses? He didn't enter the promise. And did he try a number of times to convince God about it? No? And just because of hitting twice. Now, imagine David hitting his sheep with a rod. The sheep would have gone all over the place. So, what therefore, when we talk about the rod and the young person, what are we talking? We are talking about 2 things: discipline and discipleship. And I'm using now biblical language, and I'm soon going to come into the social sciences. But basically, when we talk about the situation of the rod being used, or the discipleship and discipline being closely connected. Well, the discipleship aspect has to do with how I behave. Because the children, they learn from my behavior. Now, all of you here, before you were 2 years of age, the majority of you already spoke at least one language. And you didn't need to go and sit in a school to learn the language. In fact, the languages that we learn at school, we learn less well than what we learn by copying others when we are small. Now, that shows us that when you want to discipline somebody, you show them the way. Because if they are following you and following your example, they are not doing a lot of other things. They are doing exactly that. They are following your example. They are learning from you. Now, what is it that the latest in social science tells us? Well, you can read even the New York Times article from 17 January. If you're interested, I can send you a copy. But the title of one of the basically summary of the latest in neuroscience research is that children learn from whoever they love. So and other studies, they look at different aspects of how the brain functions. And they realize that the brain functions when the emotions get involved. And this means relationship. You cannot love out in the desert. You cannot love without anybody. So the question of the emotions have a sense in a relationship. And the relationship between the teacher and the student is fundamental. Now, one of the things that we have been saying in this context, and that leads me to the third aspect of why it's so important for you to be part of this movement, is because we want to build back better. And that doesn't just mean better buildings. It means this is the opportunity to really look into how can we build our children in terms of knowledge in a better way. And we need that better than ever because there are so many things that can distract our children today. That the brain is very dependent on the strength of our relationships. So in future, one of the questions when somebody will come to the school should be, how well is the school? How well is the school doing or whatever? But actually the question might be, what is the quality of the emotional relationships in this school? What is the quality of the emotional relationships in this school? Now we can make St. Martin the best area of the world when it comes to learning if we can take cue from this latest research. And where do I buy this? Can I go to Carrefour and buy something that will help me with this? Or can I go to IKEA? Or can I go to whatever other Chinese shop there might be around the corner? No, it all comes from inside you. It comes from you choosing what you're going to take out from your inside. You can choose to take out anger. You can choose to take out different types of attitudes. Or you can choose to take out that which will build the emotional learning. Now, they did tests, and this is actually to highlight how important your role is. They were testing, not long ago, as part of this question of emotional learning and so on, they were taking infants. We're talking about before 2 years of age. Infants. And they brought in a Chinese teacher to teach them Chinese, which is not the easiest of language, let's put it that way. 7 tonal, 7 tones falling and straight, high, low, mid, whatever. And these kids, these babies were learning it very, very quickly. Now they recorded this. And they had another group of infants look at this. And they looked at it attentively, but they didn't learn. So this just goes to reinforce. Now, I know that you have experienced this, and you have experienced the importance of this relationship. I'm simply repeating it because I think it's very important that you feel vindicated how important the presence of the teacher is. Obviously, if you have 40 children, it might be more difficult than if you have 20, or if you have 15. So the question of the number of children is important. And we have talked also earlier about the question of the home. Now, the two environments, as I mentioned, where children meet most violence, it's the home and then the school. I will, in that context, talk a little bit, because I've seen you have that issue in St. Martin. I visited a place, a foundation called Basilio. Children and youth living with mental conditions and syndromes. There are 300 million of them around the world. Now, if they were French, or if they were Swedish, or if they were Jewish, the whole world would be up in arms at how we discriminate against them. Because systematically across the world, they are ignored. In some countries, they are hidden away, seldom taken out. In other places, over-medicalized, like in the Western countries. When they have a tantrum, instead of giving them half an hour of love, they give them an injection, which gradually destroys their nervous system. And I've seen examples of young persons who hate when their parents die. They have to go to a group home. They hate being in a group home. They call the police to take them to a psychiatric place where they drug them. Then they send them back. And it's constantly like this. After 1 year, this man, Eduardo, could no longer walk. He had to use, something to hold himself to walk. They had completely destroyed his entire nervous system. How come persons that consider themselves intelligent treat other people that way? I could show you pictures from my phone. I visited a refugee camp a year ago in Tanzania. And there, a 15-year-old autistic child, he was being kept chained because they thought he had evil spirits. All he had was autism, And I convinced one of the pastors nearby to look after him, and convinced the mother to unlock him. And then I engaged Special Olympics to help organize sports activities. They trained a lot of young people. And it turned out that Malachias, or Malachi, because he comes from Burundi, so he actually speaks Kirundo. He doesn't speak many words of French, but many from Burundi speak French otherwise. And he engaged so well in sports, particularly in soccer and then in athletics, that he won a place with the Tanzanian team that will go next month to the World Games in Abu Dhabi of Special Olympics. And if you see the face of Malachi, a year ago when I found him first and how he looks today, it's like a completely different person. Now, the biggest change is not Malachi. It's all the people around him who have changed in their way of thinking. Now, one of the goals of the anti-poverty platform is leave no one behind. Those that know the Bible are very familiar with the principle of looking for the lost sheep. You know, governments, they will proudly tell you, we are reaching 99% of the population. We have achieved this progress, whatever, no? Now, the education sector and the curriculum has been established for a parameter where you have, you know, if the IQ goes from 0 and goes up to a median, and then you have highly, you know, high IQ students. The school has been done for the majority that are in between, which means those that are extremely clever, they will feel bored in the school. They will feel they are not getting sufficiently challenged. And those with a very low IQ, they will have difficulties. So it's not enough just to insert them into a classroom. We need to adapt what they will be learning and how they will be learning. They learn much better with nature, with animals, interacting, caring for animals, and so on. I run a foundation where we have a lot of animals. And the interesting thing, particularly for children living with mental conditions and syndromes, is that the animals don't discriminate against them. The horses even treat them better. They kind of move their head towards them and treat them better. How come the animals know? Shouldn't we know? Now, how important isn't it, obviously, that already in the school, children can learn to respect those differences, but at the same time, they shouldn't be like a little mascot in the classroom. We need to give them development opportunities. And we need to adapt the school curriculum for them as well. How we're going to do it, I don't know. But if St. Martin can do it, I don't know who can. Because here in St. Martin, you can adapt much better to these type of situations. The other thing is that when they grow up, they will mentally always be very young. Their intellectual age will always be between 5 years of age and 12 years of age, approximately. So they need the whole life a place. I'm not talking now of those that are sort of more functional, that can adapt, that can be inserted. I'm talking about those that are beyond that, but not in such bad condition that they need to be in Basilia, no? Not so bad, but still they are somewhere there where it's very difficult for them to live an autonomous life. For them, we need the whole life to have a skills development place. And I will, before concluding, because I'm taking this example, because we need to be analyzing whom are we leaving behind. Who is it that I didn't think about? If we're going to build back better, who were we forgetting in the process? And we sometimes say, but how can we afford this? Well, I have visited 4 years in a row. I teach at the Faculty of Law in the University of Barcelona. So I go there every year, usually in November, And I give classes during a week. And then I have the tradition of traveling 2 hours to this place, a village, with about perhaps 10,000 inhabitants, 15,000 inhabitants. And there, 2 fathers, businessmen, 42 years ago, both of them had daughters living with a mental condition. And they were competitors. They were doing olive oil and vinegar of top quality. But they got together and they said, why don't we create a company where our children can work and that can look after them, so that the day we die, they will be looked after. And they created this company. This company is still functioning today. And everyone that is employed lives with different types of conditions. Some have their arms completely like this because of cerebral palsy and high muscular tone. And the occupational therapists are employed not to do the work of the company, but to help, depending on the condition of everyone, adapting so that they can produce whatever the company is producing. So this guy, it takes him approximately 1.5 minutes to take a piece of metal and then take a plastic, put through this metal thing, connect it to the next one, and so he does a whole length, which then is made into a curtain that they put, at doors so that flies don't come in. That's one of the products that they do at this company. And not only do they provide this work for them, and nobody's behind him saying, do it faster, or whatever. No? They are enjoying themselves. But how proud isn't this man about having this job? And then, not only that, they provide food for them. But because they have so many different types of conditions and syndromes, they have to cut the food in 15 different ways. So that some have to suck it because others can cut it so they can have it served typically. So the food is adapted to the condition of everyone. Not only that, the company has built an apartment for all of them. So they have a whole area full with beautiful apartments. All of us would have loved to have an apartment like that. And activity rooms, so if they don't want to be in the room, they can be in the activity place, and so on. Not only that, the quality of life is such that now many of them are living past 70 years of age, and now they have a few more than 80. You seldom find a person living with a mental condition and syndrome that has the quality of life that makes it possible for him to live that long. What kills them is how we treat them. Now, this company still functions without state subsidies and having a turnover of $10-12 million a year. So, is it impossible to help better persons living with conditions or syndrome? Or is it us creating the hindrances to them? So as we build back better here in St. Martin, let's look not only at the buildings. Let's look at the inequalities between the mainland and the islands. Let's look at how we teach our children. Let's look for whom we are not reaching and how we could give them a life in dignity. And I hope this anti-poverty platform can really become like a sort of campaign for all those that really want this island to be what it should be, which is the shining light of the world. All the best in your hard work.
And this is for you. Who can I give the floor? Yeah.
Good night. I'm Anita Hall-Facey, an educator at the St. Martin Vocational Training School. I listened to all your presentations, and I was most intrigued, and I'm happy for a moment like this that I'm here to witness this history. All right, listening to the rights of a child and the conventions and all of that, it brings me back to my daily experience at the school I'm in. Our school is a multifaceted school with ESL students, at-risk students, all of what you spoke about, special needs, all in one package. And I'm thinking that if we're going to start research, what better place to start than at our school that has all you're looking for? I was doing a paper for school. I'm actually doing a leadership doctoral program at the University of the West Indies Open Campus, Anguilla. I wrote a paper on factors affecting ESL students at our vocational school. I used your document, The Situation of Adolescents in St. Martin, which was written by UNICEF in 2013. And I found a plethora of information that is still applicable now, but we just need to add a little more recommendations. And I'm offering my services to help in this new paradigm. That's me.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. That was the idea. Who else wants to join? Question? Comment? Yes, sir.
Good evening to all. I'm happy to be here. I'm not a teacher, actually, but I want to just pose a couple questions. I really enjoyed the presentation from Mr. Nils, the way in which he brought it forward, especially with the connection and the link to the Bible, which was very, very, I think was intriguing because you understand it much better in terms of how the rights of the child is and the rod situation and stuff like that. But my question to you is this, because here in St. Martin we have the mental health foundation, and I believe that as a government, one of the things we have to look at is the monies or the subsidies that we put in whatever institution that you might think about is the way we see that institution. If that institution is not being funded and adequately and looked at in a way that it seems to be important, then it goes along with the minds of the people as well. And we have to be very careful with that, because when you look at the situation with, let's say, other activities, and you see them subsidizing these activities with 500,000 guilders and 350,000 guilders. But you can't do that, for example, for a mental health foundation or a library. Then I think we are busy sending the wrong message to this community. And that is something I would like to ask. Why is government not looking at those situations much more and not seeing them as a taboo? Because I see in St. Martin, anybody that goes to the mental health foundation, they believe that you could be a crazy person. And that is far from the truth. We have to start treating that institution just like you treat a hospital. And there is where our focus should be. So I want you to, just give me an idea of what you think about that area.
Thank you. Who of the panelists will answer?
Do you want to? Well, I can only underscore what you are saying. If I go with my child to do the registration of my child in the school, and the school director tells me, well, I'm going to think about it. I will consider it. I would probably go and, tell the authorities, how come you have a teacher or a director of a school that talks that way? I have the right to have my child in the school. And still, when I have a child living with a condition or a syndrome, then it becomes, a different issue. And I'm not getting the type of support that my child would have needed in the school, because the school was created for a different profile of student. And we sometimes talk about inclusion, but inclusion into an education environment is not the same as insertion into a classroom. So inclusion means creating in the school an educational environment that is adapted to their situation, but where they, in certain topics, can be with the others, and in other topics, they can come and see, like, for instance, I see that Kathy at the foundation where I run, she lives with Prader-Willi syndrome. She can get a goat like anything. You try to go and get that goat, and the goat will run away from you. She walks in there, gets the goat, puts whatever she needs to put around it, and goes out and walks with it. And the typical children have their eyes open like this because they know they can't do that. So, they build their self-esteem because in certain things they are excellent, and in other things others are good. And just like birds fly, and we are not disabled because we can't fly, we simply are differently abled. So I simply want to reinforce what you're saying, that we are failing in establishing the floor of rights for children with conditions and syndromes. And it should have been for them that we first do everything, and for those families. And starting with the attitudes, I sometimes use the example, cerebral palsy. A child with cerebral palsy lacked for 1 or 2 minutes air at the moment of birth. And because of that, usually the motoric part isn't working very well. Now imagine if I condemn all of you tonight to live for 24 hours in a body that doesn't do what you want it to do. Imagine I condemn you. So 24 hours from this moment until tomorrow this hour, you're going to live in a body that doesn't do what you want it to do. You have spasms sometimes because of a slightly too high electrical discharge. Or you have low muscular tone in the muscles of your head, and your head falls like this. Or you have a constant high muscular tone, which gets your arm like this, and your fingers all crumbled up. On top of that, everybody around you starts looking at you as if you were stupid. So on top of living in this body for 24 hours, on top, the others around you think, oh, he's stupid. It's like adding salt to injury. So we need to work at changing some of these realities that we're facing, or rather ignoring. And I hope you can be world masters of that. But I'm sure that my colleague here, Sharmina, has also ideas around this.
I think it also has to do with the fact that what do we as a society deem as important? And knowledge is important. And if in the absence of knowledge, we would take an uninformed decision. I'm just going to use one example that I can recall a couple of years ago I experienced with government. You said, why is it that some organizations or specific elements would receive funds? And I'm going to go to what I know in terms of government's budget has been limited. And I believe that there must be a willingness to want to change and to go against the norm. And that actually takes an effort from the entire, I would say, Parliament as such. There was a specific foundation that felt that more funds should have gone towards sports. And they lobbied with the Parliament while the budget, the draft budget, was sent to Parliament and was being debated. And this specific group lobbied with the Parliament, who has the ability and the right to ask for the change. And the Parliament instructed for that change of budget. And the Council of Ministers, well, it wasn't the Council of Ministers at that time, it was the Executive Council. And it wasn't the Parliament either. But I'm using, of course, the same makeup. So the Island Council changed the budget, instructed the Executive Council, and there was a change to that budget. So how much does the community really believe that change should take place, and how can you advocate that change amongst your politicians? And I think that is necessary. The lobbying and, of course, indicating how we see those specific results that will be beneficial, not only to that specific group, but to the entire society as such. So I would recommend, I saw it happen, and I keep saying, you put the government there, and so you have the ability also to speak to them and indicate what those needs are that are within society. But it has to do with strategically going about it. And a lot of times, I'm sorry to say it, but we go on radio and we voice, but that doesn't change the budget. And there are real issues with the budget of not being able to increase it. As a matter of fact, we are asked constantly every year to cut the budget by a certain percentage. So even increasing in terms of other areas, it's not going to increase, but it takes the willingness to shift the focus and make the change. And that's within not only one ministry, but the entire government where the 7 ministries are concerned. It's the same way how they have dealt with looking at the recovery process. There is an entire plan. What specifically is the priority, and not what is the priority for the Ministry of Education or just for the Ministry of Finance, but in general, what is the priority for the people of St. Martin?
I would like to peg on to that, Secretary General, and just share an experience that I had early this morning with Mr. Jasadoon and Mr. Kastberg when we were talking about what kind of research, what kind of research do we need to do, and what would the outcome of that research, what would we do with the outcome of that research. And one of the things that we discussed was this of the budget, the question of all the constraints on the government of St. Martin on the budget. And particularly interesting to me is the question of social spending. How much does the government give out in terms of social needs in St. Martin? Now, we know that besides all the other, let's say, protocols and bodies of power that overlook the government of St. Martin and the budget, there's this thing called the College Financiële Toezicht. So this is the supervisory board. And this is not unique to St. Martin. Actually, back home in Puerto Rico, we have it. They say it's destroying the country. And I was so focused on this until this morning. I was really focused on this body that it just came out in the news last week that they're asking the governments of the Caribbean side of the kingdom to reduce their budgets, right? and their social spending. Now, we could agree with that or disagree with that. I personally disagree with that. I think that it's a big mistake to limit local governments in social spending. But then talking to Mr. Kastberg and talking to Mr. Yesurun, they brought to light that there are certain rights that we have to look at, and there are certain responsibilities that we have to look at. And among those responsibilities of human rights, where we find social spending necessary, you have the state parties to all these conventions that the Secretary General was speaking about earlier. So, although we have our constraints as budget here on the southern side of the island, I'm still educating myself on how it works in the north, but there is a responsibility within the Kingdom of the Netherlands to ensure that there is sufficient social spending. And I imagine it would be the same in the northern part, with the Republiek, right? And perhaps even more. And we know what our brothers and sisters do when they advocate for their own rights in the north. And what I would like to see is, and what I would like to, the way I would like to participate in this program is that USM leads that research so that we can inform all the citizens on both sides of the island of what those rights are. And we'll inform the citizens and we'll inform the governments as well. And if we need to notify Paris and The Hague, we will also do that with the research that we can provide.
Yeah, just wanted to add one point. You can never spend more than you get. And we are losing too much money, either through corruption or because you have companies that, get 5 years of free establishment, whatever, and then they change name and they get 5 more years. That is stealing from every St. Martin child. And that should become unacceptable. Now, a government will not take the initiative unless people oppose it. But right there, millions are disappearing. And if they say, yeah, but then companies will not come, well, I'm sorry, then we don't want that type of companies. We want the type of companies that don't come to steal from our children. And a country like, don't tell me that for a small country like Sualiga, St. Martin, north and south, you can't tell me that there aren't in the world a few companies left that are willing to come to such a beauty and invest and pay the taxes that they should. Let them go to New York, where they wanted to give $3 billion to Amazon.com. And in the end, the people said, well, at least some people said, no, don't come. If we have to pay, for every job, $100,000, or more, whatever, $3 billion, just to make it interesting for them to come. So don't give away the money that belongs to your children. So I think there are issues. And in terms of corruption, I regretfully think that the majority of those of us who are above 25 years of age are not going to be sufficiently forceful about it. So I hope that the young people will be forceful about it, because they are the only ones that can change in this region the rampant corruption that exists. You go to a country like Argentina, and it's disgusting to see how corruption filters through. The former president, they find bags and bags full with millions of dollars, and that was her petty cash. And it's all filled with corruption. And it's not until the young people actually start fighting, that this will change. But at least a few of us can talk about it, and if we see it, we can talk about it also. But it is challenging. But yes, the cake needs to increase. And we need to recognize, that if you want to be a state that has first quality education, that has, a better floor of rights for its children, then you need to invest more in the social sectors. That's not spending. We all know, for instance, we have clear indications how much benefit for society by investing in the education of a woman, which is worth more than investing in the knowledge of a man. And for various reasons. Still, today we talk about social investment because it's really not expenditure. It's something that will save you money down the line, and give you more income. So what is a waste is the corruption and all these white elephants and things that stand there non-used, not used. So again, let's help each other. In a small country like this, we should be able to focus on, let's stop corruption, let's make sure that those that need to pay taxes pay it, and let's have confidence that the resources are being gradually better used.
I see you all don't want to stop. We have 8 more minutes for the hour of 9. Shall I allow one more question? Okay.
There's one right behind you as well.
Okay.
Good night, everybody. My name is Dale Brady. I'm a teacher at the Vocational Training School as well. Having come to this island roughly 4 years ago, I'm listening to everything that you're saying about the condition. We have a lot of children there who are somewhere along the autism spectrum. Coupled with the whole multicultural issue, along with the fact that compulsory education is in effect, we have a conundrum of students, as Anita just referred to. They're there, and they're not being catered to per se. Listen to those different experiences that you have had. We have those situations sitting among the regular population of students. They sit there in the class, they're blank to an extent, and teachers are at their wits' end how to go about doing this. Referring to that document that you referred to as well. I'm looking at the solutions and the projections that are made from that document. It was written back in 2011. I think I looked at 2011 and 2013. And most of those solutions or those suggestions have not been effected. So now it has gotten that much serious because we have an influx of children coming to our island on a daily basis. We have a number of French, Spanish, you name it, in all the schools here. But there are no ESL classes, no transitional classes. So you're pushed off the deep end. You can't swim. There are crocodiles in the water. You'll never make it to the other side, for sure. So those of us at our school, a few of us have come up with innovative ways of using, Google Translate and so on. But it's only a tip in the bucket. From the UNICEF platform, how would you be able to help teachers on this island? And maybe from the executive, maybe you could speak with the SG. From the executive level of the education department, how can you best help teachers here make the transition so that they can now understand what multicultural education is, those special needs children that are amongst us, how do we cater for them? Because I got to tell you, the social fabric is suffering big time, big time. And it's just a matter of time before it explodes. There's smoke coming up, but it's something that a volcano is coming up, surely. How can we get help in that regard?
Well, firstly, I think we need community-based approaches to persons living with conditions and syndromes. Because if we want to use occupational therapists, neuroscientists, neurologists that do the studies, if we have the full spectrum of things, we simply don't have that in places like St. Martin. We might occasionally have some that come, but we will never have sufficient for the large number of persons living with conditions and syndromes. So we need a different approach. We can go off camera, I was about to say, into greater detail about what we could do, but they need for the whole life skills development learning. And that skills development learning can function, and they could actually work if we create certain environments that welcome them. And anyway, there are other things that we can add to this. The other thing is they learn much more outside four walls. They spend most of their life between four walls, the four walls of the home, the four walls of therapy, the four walls of the school. They actually, if you can use a park, if you can use a swimming pool, if you can use sports facilities, engage them in that type of, or music, art, it depends. It varies depending on the condition and the specifics of all of them. Let's remember that every day they need 1 inch of more autonomy than yesterday. That's what you would like to achieve when you receive them. For that, you need progress in at least 4 or 5 areas. 1, physical activity. They do too little physical activity. And if you don't do a lot of physical activity, you will not have brain development, sufficient cognitive development. So you need a lot of physical activity. They basically need to leave exhausted from the school. Secondly, wherever they are, you need to start there. Some might not be able to write a single letter. In the foundation where I help, it took us 1 year to get this girl, who is 30-something, to move her legs on the first part of a song and to clap her hands on the second part of the song. So now, when the psychologist sings this song to her, she moves correctly the legs and the hands. It took a year. Now, is the school adapted to this? You have to start where they are. You can't try to get this girl to learn in 3 days what will take her 1 year. So in terms of cognitive development, you have to have the capacity of working from where they are. Thirdly, emotional experience. We have been talking about the fact that if you have a positive emotional experience, you will learn much better. The same applies to a child that lives with a mental condition and syndrome. Now, you and me can choose when we go to a cinema, when we have fun, when we, go out and do something. They can't. So we need to create at least one place that they feel is theirs, and where they feel, here I can be myself, and where they feel they are having fun, and where we can hide everything that is therapeutic, so that they feel they are not going there for therapy, they are going there to have fun and to enjoy themselves. And having animals, making sure there's a lot of nature, doing art with nature things, lots of music, whatever they love, it helps this emotional experience. Fourth, the psychosocial contact. They might have 3, 4 around them most of their life. But their mother, except when they are in school, the mother is basically 3 feet away. Now, you might love your mother, but, if she's constantly 3 feet from you, you might start saying, "Mom, I need space." They also need space. And the psychosocial contact, broadening their network of contacts, is very much needed. And for people of faith, respect their need also for spiritual development. When you hear one of them say, "My daddy God, I love you," you feel heaven is there. When they pray, it leaves you completely, wow. And I think we need to learn, Matthew 5:3 says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." That word, poor in spirit, was used for persons living with various conditions and syndromes. Jesus started with that. Even a little glass of water for them means a lot to God. And the more you do, the happier He will be. And there's a lot that we need to do around, a lot of reflection around this, because regretfully, many pastors still consider conditions and syndromes as evil spirits. And I'm not going to question that there might be circumstances where that might happen. But I can clearly explain to a pastor what autism is and how it functions and the difference with Down syndrome. And I have had to explain to pastors, don't come and pray for their healing, because God created them this way so that we learn something from them. A person with Down syndrome transmits love in a way that we have lost it. And an autistic child tells you the truth. "Oh, you look ugly." They don't beat around the bush. They tell you just straight how it is. Each of them is telling us something. I mean, learning patience from somebody living with cerebral palsy, the patience they have, and how they have to smile to everybody, because otherwise nobody would even come and say hello to them. Would we have that kind of patience? So again, I think as a church, for people of faith, we have failed them miserably. And it is strange that so much of humanitarian aid and many things are done by people that are not people of faith. And I think very often it has to do with the failure of the church of doing what it should do. So again, how many Sunday schools adapted for children living with conditions and syndromes do we have? Have we adapted services? I was in Congo not long ago, and there what they did was every Saturday morning in a church was the day for all those living with conditions and syndromes. And I mean, you would cry walking into that service. And many of the children were typical children, born to persons living with various conditions and syndromes. And how they were helping each other, how they were singing, And I was thinking, they ended up having to have it that way because the church of the typical wouldn't give them that space. So yes, we have a lot to do.
We're going over the 9 o'clock hour.
That's okay.
And what we actually have experienced tonight is that we should not stop here. So let this be the start. I am giving the floor to the president of the WITU to close off and to promise when we will continue.
Well, in closing, I would like to thank again all the persons that came out tonight, And I would like to say a bigger thank you to a person that took time out of his busy schedule to grace our shores and to share the knowledge with the different stakeholders and the different group, which is none other than the man of the moment. Give a big applause for him, Mr. Nils Kastberg. Okay? This whole session is being taped, so we hope to also share it among the persons that could not be here tonight. And in addition, thank you very much for those words and for updating us on the rights of the children and some of the content. SG, Mrs. Shamina Powell Richardson. I got just now in my ears a request. Can we have Mr. Kastberg meet with the teachers of the St. Martin Vocational School due to the fact of what they are going through? Now, Mr. Kastberg only have 2 days left on St. Martin, which is, well, I call it 2 days because I'm looking at the mornings, Tuesday, and his flight is Wednesday afternoon. And basically knowing the type of multi-purpose and the things that I would do, I would just hold back that flight and make sure you get to the airport to still meet the flight, knowing me. But I would know if we have that space. I'm looking at SG2 because then if it can be coordinated within those 2 days, that we can have, even if it is a session of a half to 45 minutes, yes, that would be possible. We would much appreciate. Again, as an anti-poverty platform, you are hearing the word anti-poverty. Well, since 2011, there was a collaboration between the St. Martin Seniors and Pensioners Association, the Windward Island Chamber of Labor Unions, that is also 8 unions are involved there, and also the NGOs Federation affiliated with the SunFed. And we came together and keep bringing the awareness and the thoughts about making St. Martin actually a better place. Anti-poverty, it means the rights to sustainable development, the rights to your development from child straight up. And there is where, in research, we came up that for a family not to be in poverty, there is a living wage, or not a minimum wage and an indexation of minimum wage, but actually a living wage that is needed from a combined income. And we have our thoughts, we are advocating, and we are also making this known publicly with the hope that all the differences within this kingdom that we call the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and all the differences within the country St. Martin, that we can also have a stop to the discrimination and have equal rights. So it is not going to stop, at least from our perspective, to this evening alone. The research that we so want from this study, where it is more or less the title, we want to hear from the children. That is part where, of course, the teachers would come into play, and there are other ways and means and tools that we can use to reach to the teachers to be involved. Once this project is up, the teachers that are participating, we hope to have them compensated also in this research, to have them compensated. So please, just spread the word as we will continue in our efforts to reach to basically to have the rights of the child respected, the rights of the teachers, the rights of the adolescents, and everyone inside of the kingdom.
Here with the president of the University of St. Martin. You had 4 lectures here this evening. I mean, not this evening, but you have one start from since Friday. You also have Saturday, then you had also Monday, and then today. right?
Yes.
How do you find that the message is getting across? Do you find that the information is very relevant for the people of St. Martin to, when you for instance, since you had that 4 sections there at the university?
Yes, I think we took advantage of Mr. Kastberg's visit here to St. Martin in a very fruitful way. First, he met with the faculty and staff of the University of St. Martin to talk about the role of the university in society in general, but particularly here in St. Martin, and how research at the university can produce public policy, and how research can inform citizens about things like human rights, children's rights in particular. Then in the evening we met with representatives of the various unions, trade unions here at St. Martin, and we talked about what research at the university can mean for the trade unions, because trade unions are composed of workers. Workers have families, and in those families you have youth and children, and they can also benefit from the knowledge about rights that belong to all citizens. Then on Saturday morning, we met with the communities of faith, representatives of different churches on St. Martin, from the north and from the south, and we talked about human rights from generally a Christian perspective, which is very important for St. Martin, an island of faith, those people who are generally people of faith. And we talked about the role that the church can play in monitoring what services are given to children and youth. And then this evening, we had our 4th activity where we met particularly with WITU, with the Teachers Union here in the south. We also had representatives of the Teachers Union in the north, and we talked about the roles and responsibilities of teachers and how teachers can fit into this project that we're working on, and that is building research in order to serve St. Martin and particularly the children and youth.
Now, may I ask you this question? The rest of the population of St. Martin isn't getting this information. Is any plan that you're going to get this information out to the rest of the public?
Well, it's very important for us, for the press to be here, so we're very grateful that they've also been monitoring this weekend that we've had with Mr. Nils Kastberg and with the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. But what we would like to do here at USM is to start that process of doing research, conducting research on the rights of children and youth, monitoring the social economic condition, and through the results of that research, we'll be able to inform the public.